For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh, and today Christmas is coming just a little early and just a little naughty. I am joined by Miss Kat Summers. She is the author behind the book A Naughty List for Christmas, which I just got done discussing over with our friends Boobies and Newbies. We'll provide a link in the show notes below for that episode. How are you doing? Welcome.
I am good. I'm excited to be here.
I am very excited to talk about this. Normally, I don't do that kind of stuff where I'm like, I read something and I'll be like, I'm going to throw it out. It's very rare that I do it, but I got about 3/4 the way through this book and I just felt like I couldn't put it down and wanted to reach out to see if I could sit down with you. I think you're outside of Kelly. You're our first romance novelist
Love
outside
it.
of her. So welcome.
I'm excited to be here. My audience is like 98% women, so super excited we got a man. Love that.
Kelly can attest to this. I have had a lot of misconceptions about romance novels over the years, and being friends with her and my wife has recently gotten into them. This really kind of deconstruct it, and I've gotten into the genre myself. I read them almost as much as I read horror now.
Okay. Palatable.
So yeah.
Keep it loose.
So A Naughty List for Christmas is part of this larger series that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. It's the Sugar Peak Resort series. But this book is really just grabbed me. It hooked me right from probably the first few chapters. Can you tell us a little bit about what this book's all about?
Yeah, so A Naughty List for Christmas is the story of a woman named Mia who's in a long-term relationship that's clearly not going anywhere. So she decides to leave. She gets the job opportunity at a ski resort to be the new events manager. The ski resort is where all the other books are set. So she goes to the ski resort. One drunken night, she makes a naughty list of things that she wants to do, wants to try, which is accidentally seen by the resort handyman, Jamie, who volunteers to help her go through this list. Jamie's a little bit of a Grinch. He's not a big Christmas guy. So they kind of help her list of going through the naughty things. She gets him some Christmas joy. And then in the end, they maybe or maybe not fall in love.
I love how organic this book feels to where I was really surprised. I think one of the things that really caught me off guard was how long you really kind of let the pre-life of Mia before Sugar Peak kind of exist. Can you kind of talk about laying that groundwork and how important it is for portions of events that take place later in the book?
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. That was actually something that I kind of struggled with in the beginning because normally a Christmas novella, they're short, they're light, they don't have a ton of backstory, but I just love characters. And I love seeing the motivation behind them. So I really thought it was important to show why she hadn't tried all these things and why she wanted to get a new lease on life. And if I wrote a short story last year, it's my next release as a full-length novel. So I had already met Mia and Steven. So I kind of felt like I wanted that story to come full circle for the people that read the short story or that will later read the short story and meet them as a couple to kind of get a glimpse into their demise. And, he's not that likable. So I think it'll be cathartic for people to be like, oh, thank God she kicked him to the curb.
It's very rare. I don't remember the last time I've felt a surge of anger reading some of this books. But I am kind of curious. With our publication, we do talk really openly about mental health and what art teaches us about mental health and things like that. And so when we kind of meet Mia and Steven, it's kind of this relationship that is just kind of fruitless. It's essentially just two people that meet together. And I'm kind of curious diving into that. Can you talk about dissecting the mental health of a dying relationship and why you think someone would choose to stay in that kind of environment?
Yeah, I think so much of it, and this is something that Mia is struggling with in the beginning, is that it's so much easier to go along with the flow. So easy to stay comfortable. It's so scary to take a risk, to move, to break up, whatever it is. It's so much harder. I've heard someone say one time it's harder to stay sometimes in a lot of cases, or it's harder to leave than to stay, because it's the devil situation. You know what the worst is, and you're not unhappy, but you're not happy. I think I've heard it called one time, a tolerable level of unhappiness. You reach this tolerable level of unhappiness and you're like, well, will I be even more unhappy if I'm alone and still having all these other problems in my life? Because we know that that doesn't necessarily fix your life. So just from a mental health perspective, I think it's, you get stuck in ruts and it's hard to leave. And you never know those challenges you're going to face. So
now, some would call it, I guess, like a rom-com trope of the safe boyfriend, the parents saying, you should kind of do it. But having lived in a small town prior to where my wife and I live now, I think it's also a small town mentality, which this book also has in the first act of this book.
Mhm.
Can you kind of talk about tapping into that aspect of mental health and also kind of that lethargic nature or apathy that
Mhm.
kind of comes along with that territory?
Well, in small towns, there's so much homogeneous thinking. So when
Mhm.
everyone around you is saying one thing, like you're gonna think you're the crazy or you're the bad one for having a divergent opinion, which is, hey, this relationship's not serving me, I want to leave. But your mom, your cousin, your next door neighbor Ellen Sue, like everyone's telling you, no, this is fine, this is life. And I think that weighs down on you. And when your whole support system is there, like, I mean, if you leave, everyone's going to be disappointed in you. So you don't have anywhere to go. You don't have anyone who's going to help you through those trying times. And I've never lived in a small town per se, but I live in a big small town with kind of a close-knit community where everyone knows everyone. So I've seen that myself, and I've seen it with friends who lived in small towns, that it's so easy to get stuck into that cycle of what everyone else thinks is true and not tapping into your own knowledge of yourself and your situation.
Yeah, some people are kind of birthed, out of wanting to like wonder what else is out there. And I love how this story kind of naturally progresses into that, where you can tell very early on that Mia's very uncomfortable and it's kind of just like, well, I'm here because this is tradition, this is what is expected of me. And then she kind of gets this invitation from Sugar Peak to kind of step into their role, which places her not only in a new city but in a new country as well. Kind of exploring these all kinds of new dynamics. And so, did you kind of have moving kind of her from like this like really kind of tried and true, almost kind of just very quiet, very stoic intro that we get to her in the beginning, to kind of this like very lively individual? Did you have a kind of like a chart or like a map in your mind of like the character traits that you wanted to see kind of switch and grow? Because while this is a novella that obviously is a sexual awakening of sorts,
Mm.
this is also her character is kind of also learning to really not only love for the first time in a long time, but also to love herself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I kind of had two versions of Mia, the like trapped Mia and the Mia I knew she wanted to be. And I think that's something that a lot of people and women especially can relate to, is like changing your environment can change so much. People always talk about their vacation self, and that person's fun and likes to go out dancing and likes to do all these things. And there's so much that when you're in a new environment, you kind of give yourself license to do. So for me, having her in a whole new place, no one that she knew, no one ragging on her, she could kind of have the time to figure out what it is she wanted, who she wanted, without people who'd known her for 30 plus years weighing down on their opinions on her.
So kind of getting into the title, like the main theme kind of the story is like this, it revolves around essentially two lists, and one you have for Mia, one you have for Jamie. And Jamie is like essentially trying to like feel the joy of the holiday season, which is kind of the lighter of the two lists. And then obviously Mia's got the naughty list that she really wants to explore. Crafting this, it just seems like this kind of expands such a wide array of sexual topics. Could you talk about the process for creating the naughty list within the book?
Yeah. It was definitely an interesting dynamic. I'd had different iterations. I had longer versions. I wanted to create a list that had both some like really adventurous things, but also some like really simple average things to just kind of show the dichotomy of like how quote unquote boring her life was before. So really it was, I mean, some of it was like inspired by other books that I'd read. Some of it was, you know, some seasonal stuff like getting tied up with ribbon or using frosting as a food. Really it was just thinking about what types of things are kind of a baseline level of sexual kink, not anything too drastic. She's new, she's feeling it out, but what kinds of things would she want to try that are everyday, and what kind of things could she have read about in a book that she wanted to try? So, you know, I kind of thought too about some like popular books that had been out recently and what were some of the things in there, and just kind of went from there.
I also love how ingrained into the Christmas season this story actually is. I've read quite a few Christmas novellas over the last few years, and they just kind of seem to be like romance stories that take place at Christmas time.
Mhm.
Whereas this one is so ingrained into the culture of Christmas, whether it's from, you know, her being the resort kind of event planner around Christmas, or as you mentioned, like also kind of having some of those kinkier elements, you know,
Mhm.
kind of get that Christmas spin on it with the Christmas ribbon and stuff like that. How important was that for you in terms of really diving the roots down deep into Christmas?
I think it was really important. I mean, one of what you just noted, I've seen so many reviews for Christmas novellas, and I've read so many myself. When you're just like, you know, oh, they get snowed in around Christmas, but they could have also been stuck on a deserted island. Like, there's nothing Christmas about this. And I think, you know, with Jamie's side of the story, it's, you know, she's discovering herself, but he's kind of discovering, like you said, the joy, the simple things. And Christmas is such a beautiful time to do that. And it just gives you so much to play with, and the seasonality of things. Like any other time of year, you know, there's not as much fun. And I love Christmas personally. I love Christmas movies, which is why they watch so many Christmas movies. So just it, I think just like little pockets of joy. And so adding those in was also a creative challenge. So I kind of enjoyed that, the challenge of it all.
Now you talked about in the end, kind of the acknowledgments portion of it, kind of the challenge of how hard it is to write a novella, to kind of take all of these ideas, and having also being a programmer for a film festival and kind of seeing the capabilities that filmmakers can take these really short stories and pack a lot of stuff in there. I think this is arguably probably one of the best novellas I've read in terms of character development, because like we said, like it lays its foundation that's prioritized, and you kind of really get to not only meet Mia, but you get to see like the shitty life that she's kind of falling routine to, and ultimately where she ends up. And you mentioned this being kind of like longer. Like, what was like the perfect length for you to kind of get the story that we now have in Kindles and wherever people can actually buy support?
Yeah, novellas are really hard for me, especially because I just love characters, and all of my characters, hopefully people feel like the true development of them, because I don't want my and both characters to be the same as when they started and when they ended. Like that's, you know, with a romance, a lot of times it's easy to just let the romance be the only story, but I think we all know that a good romantic relationship changes you in some ways, and
Mhm.
you know, the life circumstances change you. So having it be long enough to tell that story. Most novellas are under 50,000 words. So, you know, the real trick was like a short story is 15,000. So just figuring out how to get in between that enough room that tells my whole story. Most of my books are around 80 to 90,000 words. So to bring it down, this one I believe is technically 36 or 38 if you include the chapter in the back of the next book. So narrowing it down, I think I originally had like 9 spicy scenes and it got cut down to 6. So
Mm.
figuring out what could stay, what could go, um, what mattered really for the characters. was tough, but you gotta do what you gotta do.
So we talked about that. I'm also the co-host of our horror podcast here, and we recently covered Gremlins, which was, it's now a staple for a lot of holiday viewing, but it's kind of the first horror film to really kind of address the downside of the holidays, that not everyone has joy and not everyone has these hallmark holiday moments, and that's kind of where we meet Jamie. Speaking from a person that kind of has the ups and downs with the holidays, myself, how important was that to kind of show that there is kind of that Grinch moment where you can experience a character that not only enters in maybe in this like Dr. Seuss Grinch level, but then throughout the story, you actually get to see the heart grow 3 times the size.
My favorite thing in that aspect was, I think a lot of times when people are writing a Grinchy character, they have like some big why for why they hate Christmas, like some big event, some tragedy. And I really wanted Jamie to just kind of more be apathetic. Like it's not some sad, someone died or his house caught fire. It's just like not really a thing. And as someone who loves Christmas and, knows there's so much joy in it, I kind of wanted to show the journey of like the middle ground. And he doesn't become like the mayor of Whoville. He comes like to a nice neutral place of like liking Christmas. And especially too, like there's nothing I think I like more in a romance novel is a man who loves something because his partner loves something, and getting joy from her joy. And I think that's kind of how he starts to feel is like, okay, well, she loves this. I'm going to love it with her. And then she kind of shows him this. A lot of the stuff for him is the small, simple things. It's not like a big Christmas tree lighting. It's like baking cookies and watching movies and seeing how Christmas can be relational and how it can be a vehicle for your relationships, I think is what's so great about his journey in this story.
It's never too late to like Christmas.
Never too late.
You mentioned earlier that this story originally was a lot longer. I am kind of curious what scenes or what portions of the story kind of hit that cutting room floor, because this just seems like such a tightly wound story.
Well, the naughty list was originally like 12 things instead of 10, or it was 2 longer. So that was one of them. The portion of the epilogue, the vacation was a longer part. And then one of the hardest things to write was the Stephen coming back part. So originally there was a lot more to that, but then I kind of decided that he didn't deserve all this attention and all this melancholy. There was another snowstorm in there. So like the conflict part was a lot longer of Jamie like wrestling with his decisions and that and her dealing with that. So I kind of just decided that the conflict didn't need to be as severe. So I dialed it back so we could really focus on the journey they were on versus I have a lot of my books, I have breakups that aren't really breakups. Like they're kind of like it's a breakup in the romance definition, but like the characters don't always know they're broken up.
That's I texted Kelly when I got to the part of Stephen getting to, and I felt like I was like watching just like this psychological thriller in literary form, because it just drew me, and I was like, I feel such emotions and such anger right now. Like this has never happened to me while reading a romance novel before. So kudos to you for that.
Yeah, I can't take all the credit. I stole it from friends, so except in Friends it works. So
that's amazing. Well, my last question is revolving around this series, A Naughty List for Christmas, that is a part of, which is the Sugar Peak Resort series. And this is one of 4 novellas that are going to be available between now and the end of the year. But the catch with this one, and I don't believe you see this in any other genre outside of romance, is that it's all written by different authors. And can you talk about the challenge of crafting a world as like this collaborative process and making sure that there was cohesion for everything?
Yes. So I am very type A, very planned. I have spreadsheets on spreadsheets on spreadsheets for all of my series. So the biggest challenge for me is that my co-authors were not. So So they would like have a question, and we had like this master word doc where I had like did a rough timeline of my book since it was the first, and like, you know, someone else is having a snowed in moment. So like, where does that fit into the story? Or some of the other people work at the resort. So where does it fit in that like they might be having a conflict that my characters might pick up on, or especially since me as the event manager, like she's having all these events, maybe feed them into your story. So being first, I think, makes it easier in that I kind of, you know, got a lot of leeway on the timeline, but it's very big struggle to just make sure we had similar characters, or making sure that, you know, we don't have big world events. Or obviously this book's set in Canada, only one of us is Canadian, so constantly checking with our Canadian author, like, hey, is this a thing there? Or like, what would that be called? Like the whole Boxing Day scene of Mia not knowing Boxing Day is a big deal, like that was me. And I was like, oh, is that a thing people care about? Because we don't, because I'm like, but they already shopped on Black Friday, why would they shop on Boxing Day? So it's a big struggle. It was a lot of being like, hey, that's a cool thing we should put on the document, hint hint, put it on the document. So that was a test in my writing process, because normally it's just me. I know for sure I could never co-author a book, because I just don't have that capability to work with someone else's brain and organization in that way. But our stories are separated enough that if there's some minor things, it's not a huge deal. But I know I love an interconnected series, so I wanted to try to get as much of everyone else's stories in there as I could.
That's awesome. I am really excited to check out the other stories that are in the series. I know Kelly and I were talking about it when we did her podcast, but the book is called A Naughty List for Christmas. You guys can get it now on Amazon, Kindle Limited, and a bunch of other places. But where can people find you online, and where can people check out the book?
Yeah, so you can find the book, obviously, like you said, Amazon, Kindle. You can find me on Instagram, Threads, TikTok for now. There's a Facebook. I don't ever use it. My website's catsummerswrites.com. All of my handles are at catsummerswrites. So come say hi. Like I said, this book is kind of a sequel. I don't want to say sequel, but there's another story coming out February 14th that has Mia and Steven as a couple in there. So if you hate Steven and want to hate him more, you're going to have plenty of opportunity in Zealous Intentions to see what a lame boyfriend he is. So
All right, we will provide links to all of that in the show notes below, as well as the episode of Boobies and Newbies that I was graciously featured on to talk about this book. So you can hear Kelly and I gush about that, Wicket, and other things that, if you've listened to our podcast over the years, you know that we're big musical and theater nerds. But in the show notes below, you guys will also find links to our mental health resource library, other social media for us, as well as our podcast network, Patreon, and more. And hit that subscribe button. And until next time, remember, happy holidays.